Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first ever Accessibility Design Forum. We are very excited to be here today for this event that a group of us at DMI, the Beyond Compliance Task Force, Access to Independence, and the City of Madison have been working on for months. Thank you for being here today. My name is Jason Ilstrup, President of Downtown Madison, Inc. And we're going to go over the details of today's panel, but before we begin, we want to bring in our chair of our Beyond Compliance Task Force and the executive director of Access to Independence, Jason Balangi. And Jason is going to describe why we're here today and what we hope to learn from these sessions. Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good morning to you, Jason. And good morning, everybody. And welcome to the Accessibility Design Forum. Those of you tuning in today are participating in something really special. And I'm thrilled that you, our hosts, our moderators and panelists, supporters and sponsors could all make today possible. My name is Jason Balangi. I use he, him pronouns. And for those who are unable to see me, I want to just give a brief visual description of myself. I'm a white male with short brown hair, a little bit more gray than I wish to acknowledge, wearing a black polo shirt with the Access to Independence logo on it. And I'm in my office with part of my desk set up behind me. A little bit more about me. I'm the executive director of Access to Independence, as Jason had just mentioned, which is located here in Madison, Wisconsin. Access to Independence is a center for independent living that serves South Central Wisconsin. And we serve people of any type of disability and any age. What also makes us such an asset for our region is that we are a consumer-run organization. The majority of our board, our leadership, and our direct service staff are people with disabilities. Access to Independence through our Accessibility Services program is a proud supporter of today's event. Our accessibility services are tailored to businesses, organizations, and local governments to provide consultation and technical assistance to improve accessibility and inclusion. For more information, you can see the link that we posted in the chat for today. I also have the privilege to serve as the chair of the Downtown Madison Incorporated, or DMI, Beyond Compliance Task Force, which has been the group organizing today's event. And we've been organizing for this for over the last year. The Beyond Compliance Task Force, which is a subcommittee to the DMI Inclusiveness Committee, has been active since 2018 and has a very clear goal: a downtown Madison that is fully accessible and inclusive to people of all disabilities, all ages, and all identities. The Beyond Compliance Task Force is building a critical public-private partnership that includes private businesses and organizations, members of the City of Madison's Disability Rights Commission, as well as the staff from the City of Madison's Civil Rights Department, and citizens with disabilities. The Beyond Compliance Task Force has been tackling a project each year since 2019, starting with the release of a report that outlined the barriers to downtown Madison as identified by people with disabilities. In 2020, the task force worked to address accessibility with the city's Streetery program through creation of an accessibility guide. And in 2021, the task force created a guide and provided a free training to improve the accessibility and inclusion of festivals and events here in this great city. As the task force looked to 2022, it made the commitment to hold some sort of an event that would bring together people to figure out how we can do better in designing, building, and modifying spaces that are more than ADA compliant. I want to take a moment to express my gratitude to each and every member of the task force that has participated in our planning process, and to those who are participating in today's event. I am also incredibly thankful to the staff at DMI for all of their work in promoting and hosting today's event. While many organizations talk about valuing accessibility and inclusion, DMI has and continues to listen, learn, and leverage to accomplish our shared goals. So why is today important? It's time we change the narrative about accessibility in our built world. It's time we stop making minimum compliance the goal. We are better than minimum compliance. Our professions are better than minimum compliance. Our investments are better than minimum compliance. And most importantly, our customers, our renters, and our families, friends, and neighbors are better than minimum compliance. You are going to hear from a variety of panelists from New York to California and with several from the Madison area. They are going to share their perspectives about how we can do better, and each have been tasked with providing takeaways for those attending. What makes this event so cool is that each panel not only has the professional's perspective, each panel also has a disability perspective. Finally, it's worth noting that today is the 32nd anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, considered by many to be the most significant civil rights law for people with disabilities in our country's history. Much has changed for the better for people with disabilities in our country, but we cannot truly tear down the walls of exclusion until we all do more to move beyond minimum compliance in this country. With that, I'd like to turn things over to my friend with the finest first name, Jason Ilstrup. Jason?
Well, thank you. I think I do have the finest name, Jason. We're very excited to have you all here today. Again, I'm Jason Ilstrup, president of Downtown Madison, Inc. I'm a 45-year-old white male with glasses, once had brown hair, but as Jason said, unfortunately, the gray is coming in. I'm in a brown suit with a tie in my office here in downtown. And yes, those are Legos behind me, the Eiffel Tower. So we're so thankful to be here today. We would not be here without all the support and our leadership from Jason Balangi and the team at Access to Independence and the City of Madison, Rebecca Hoyt and the team, and also our friends at the Disability Rights Commission, in particular, Jane Emke and Chan Stroman as well, who will be joining us later today for more panels. So I'm going to go over what's going to happen today, what we're looking at doing over the next few hours, and then a great event we have this evening that we hope you all join us for. So right now, we're in the middle of the session of giving the introduction. So we're going to run for a few more minutes here till about 9:15. Then we're going to take a break so everyone can get situated and get ready for the first panel, which will start at 9:30. And that is going to be the panel on understanding the process, how to find common dialogue to achieve accessibility and inclusion. It's going to be moderated by Chan Stroman from our Beyond Compliance team. We're very excited to have Bill Fadoon, AIA, from CUNA, John Chapman, also AIA architect at EUA, and Nick Zousky, the access coordinator for the Wisconsin DNR, and Rebecca Hoyt, the aforementioned City of Madison Disability Rights and Service Specialist. So that'll begin at 9:30 and run until 10:20. We will then take a break from 10:20 to 10:30 before we start our second virtual session. Panel number 2 will be the value of accessibility. How can accessibility and inclusion be a priority in the design process, and what does value mean? That'll be moderated by our own Jason Balangi and include panelists Kevin Donahue, AIA out of Strang, Wendy Weiler, a great DMI member and member of the Beyond Compliance Task Force, and Jenny Freeman from the Disability Opportunity Fund. That'll again run from 10:30 to 11:20. We'll take another break from 11:20 to 11:30. And then at 11:30, we'll begin our final panel, which is panel number 3, multifamily housing with universal appeal. How can universal design be more significant in multifamily housing projects? Our own Wendy Dwyer will be the moderator of this panel. The panelists are Fatima Are from the Kelsey, Jane Nemke from the Madison Disability Rights Commission, Tom Hirsch, who's FAIA with Hirsch Group, Allie Cannington with the Kelsey, and Dale Sternenberger from JLA, also an AIA architect. Those will be our 3 panels today. And then at 12:20, Jason and I will be back recapping what happened here today and sending you off. We're going to record each of these sessions separately. So they'll live on our YouTube channel. We'll send those links out to each of our attendees today, and they'll also be available on our website. So each of these sessions will be recorded, and you can watch them at any time. They'll be recorded separately, so you don't have to fast forward or go back into each. Now, lastly, but certainly not least, this afternoon from 4 to 6, DMI, Access Independence, our friends at Hovde Properties, who generously donated their space to host a happy hour here at Ovation 309 Sky Club, right on Johnson Street. Beautiful space all the way at the top. We are so thankful for all of their partnership there. So from 4 to 6, join us live this afternoon at Ovation 309 SkyCap. All the information on parking and everything is available on our website. Last, today we want to thank our sponsors again. We wouldn't be here without you all. A huge thanks to our presenting sponsor, CUNA Mutual Group, who took a chance on the first ever panel. So thank you to the team at CUNA Mutual Group for making sure that this event happens. We're so thankful, CUNA. We're very excited to have Bill Fadoon from CUNA Mutual on our first panel. Along with our friends at CUNA Mutual, we have Access to Independence, who has done a tremendous amount to make this happen. So thank you to Access to Independence. AIA Wisconsin, they have been tremendous. Today is credited for all you AIA members. Please make sure you stay signed in and we'll get that information to AIA so you get credit for these classes. Our great friends at Boardman Clark, law firm down here in downtown Madison, the city of Madison, and in particular the Department of Civil Rights. So thank you to Norm and the team there. And last but not least, our great friends at Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison. So again, CUNA Mutual, Access to Independence, AIA Wisconsin, Boardman Clark, City of Madison, and Ho-Chunk Gaming for being our sponsors today. We would not be here without you. All right. We're going to go to a break for the next 15 minutes. We'll be back on at 9:30 for our first panel discussion on understanding the process. Anything else I missed, Jason, today here before we get going to this break?
No, I'm extremely thrilled. This has been well over a year in the process and the making of this event. And again, appreciation all around to you as well and to the team at DMI. Madeline, John, and others who've been involved in this. It's what's made it possible. And again, to all our sponsors, as you described. So I'm excited. We'll take a quick break and we'll jump right into it. And I'm looking forward to our first panel as well.
Awesome. So we're just going to go into another mode here. You won't see us for a few minutes. We'll be back at 9:30. So join us again at 9:30 for our first panel on understanding the process. We'll see you in about 14 minutes. Talk to you soon. Good morning again, everyone. It's good to see you all. We're back here for our first session today of the Accessibility Design Forum. Today we have panel number 1, Understanding the Process, How to Find Common Dialogue and to Achieve Accessibility. We've got an excellent panel here today. We're feeding everyone into the panel, so we just need a second, but we're going to start off with our moderator, Chan Stroman. Good morning, Chan. How are you today? And the floor is yours.
Good morning, Jason. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chan Stroman. As a visual, I am a Black woman with short black hair, glasses, wearing a floral print, and there is a blurred background of my office behind me. So again, welcome to the forum and welcome to the first panel of our forum. I am going to be the moderator, and our panel is entitled Understanding the Process. We'll be exploring how to find common dialogue to achieve accessibility and inclusion as designers and builders and people with disabilities talk and work together. And as takeaways, our hope is to increase awareness and inspire action, but not just what to do, but actionable ideas for how to do it. So I am going to now turn to each of our 4 panelists who will be introducing themselves. And let's start first, our introductions first with our panelist, Rebecca Hoyt. Rebecca?
Good morning, everyone, and happy ADA anniversary. My name's Rebecca Hoyt. My pronouns are she, hers. And I am a white woman with long, curly brown and silver hair. I am sitting in my home office with lots of plants behind me. I have green eyes and I wear glasses with rose-colored tinted lenses. I am the Disability Rights and Services Specialist with the City of Madison Department of Civil Rights. Pleased to be with you all today.
Thank you, Rebecca. Our next panelist is Bill Fadoon. Bill?
Good morning. I'm Bill Fadoon. I am a white male with brown hair, and I'm wearing a teal linen button-down shirt. And behind me is a blue and pink painting in an office at CUNA Mutual Group. I am Director of Facilities at CUNA Mutual Group. I am a licensed architect in Wisconsin and California.
Thank you, Bill Fadoon. Next up is our panelist, John Chapman.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Chapman. I am a white male with brown hair that's graying every day. I have glasses on. I'm wearing a blue blazer with a white check shirt. And I am sitting in a conference room in our office, and our office is located in the Ovation building where the reception will be held this afternoon. So I am an architect. I am privileged to lead EUA's Madison studio.
Thank you, John Chapman. And now, last but not least, our fourth panelist, Nick Zousky.
Hi, good morning. My name is Nick. I'm the accessibility coordinator for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. I am a white male, mid-40s, no gray hair yet, devastatingly handsome. I'm wearing, Jason put me up to that. I'm wearing a blue and kind of red and white plaid shirt, and I'm sitting in my living room.
Thank you, Nick, and Chan Stroman here, and thank you to all our panelists for those introductions. So now we're going to move on to presentations by each of our panelists on our topic today, understanding the process. We will be starting with a presentation from John Chapman.
Thank you, Chan. I'm going to try and share my screen. It says I'm disabled. Here we go. Can everyone see the screen? Yes?
Yes, John, we can. We can see it.
Okay. Thank you. So about 25 years ago, a working group of architects, engineers, product designers, environmental designers, they came together at North Carolina State University and defined universal design. It is the concept of designing all products in the built environment to be aesthetic and usable to the greatest extent possible by everyone, regardless of their age, their ability, or status in life. And as an architect at EUA, this means creating intentional spaces for everyone to experience so that people do not feel segregated. One of our design goals is to provide equity throughout the built environment. There are 7 guiding principles in universal design. The first, equitable use. An example of this is lever door handles, which are much easier to use than knobs that require a certain amount of gripping strength and twisting ability, something that can be difficult for anyone with arthritis or carpal tunnel syndrome or a hand injury. Flexibility in use, a design that accommodates a wide range of preferences and abilities. For instance, creating work surfaces that can be adjusted by height to suit different user needs. Simple and intuitive use. Items such as a recliner or a shower or a television should be simple enough to operate without a person having to reach for the owner's manual. Anyone of any cognitive or physical ability levels should be able to use them, even if they've never seen it before. Perceptible information. Are your thermostats, stoves, and other appliances easy to operate and understand for someone who's never used them before? Are their displays large enough for anyone to see, and are they within reach? Your design plan should have a good tolerance for error, meaning that design minimizes hazards and the adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. Raised door thresholds can prove to be a tripping hazard, especially for the very young and the elderly. They can also be an impediment for wheelchairs and walkers. By lowering the threshold, many potential accidents can be avoided. Good universal design requires low physical effort, meaning that a minimum of fatigue is expended by anyone. For instance, on a recent student housing project at UW Whitewater, we used large window levers with easy grasp operation. And in the same project, we dealt with size and space for approach and use, where we created wider closets with lower shelving for the ability to easy access. That's, I think Bill is next.
Sounds good.
Thank you, John. So thank you, John Chapman, for that presentation. And yes, our next presentation is from Bill Fadoon.
Great. I'm gonna share my screen. You can let me know when you see it. Just give a nod.
We can see it great, Bill.
Perfect.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning. All right, so this first slide is a rendering of our brand new building on Mineral Point Road at our Madison campus. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did in this building to ensure inclusion and accessibility. So on the next slide, I run through a couple of things that we did right out of the gate at the beginning. We had a presentation and elicited feedback from our Allies for Disabilities employee resource group. And they gave us a lot of suggestions on the floor plan and things that we were doing in the building that they would like to see as they thought about what our old buildings were like on the rest of campus. We also asked Access to Independence to do a review of EUA's design documents, and they provided an entire list for us of suggestions that they had so that we could go above and beyond just the letter of the law ADA. We also consulted with an acoustician that our architect brought on board just to make sure that we weren't creating any areas of the building that wouldn't be pleasant to be in. We're also currently applying for a new program, Universal Design Certification. And we don't know yet the status of that. We're hopeful that we will obtain certification. But what that means is we hired a universal design consultant who went through our plans and has walked through the building and given us some suggestions. So the image on this slide is a drink fridge. And one of the suggestions that they made in our food service area was that you should have columns of product instead of rows so that people at different heights can reach the product, which was such a simple, easy solution and something that our food service provider had not even thought of. So we went ahead and implemented that in our existing buildings because there's nothing stopping us, and we'll make sure to do that in our new building too when that opens. So one of the design features of this building was this iconic grand stair, which is fantastic and a great feature of the building, but obviously not inclusive for everyone. Some of our employees are not able to take the stairs. And so our design team made sure that we upgraded our elevator fit and finish just to make sure that that was a grand experience, just like the stair for anyone who would not be taking the stair. So the images shown on screen are of the grand stair and then a rendering of what the inside of our passenger elevators are going to look like. We also have wellness rooms on each floor. Big increase from our previous buildings. Starting from scratch, you can do things like that. There are 6 throughout the building, at least 1 on each floor. And then in terms of inclusivity, one of our wellness rooms even includes a foot bath for those that are required to wash their feet as a part of their prayer practice. And the other wellness rooms might be for nursing moms or just a quiet place if you're not feeling well or something like that. So the 2 images on screen, there is one image just showing a sign into our wellness rooms and then an image of the foot bath that we installed. We also considered gender inclusion, making sure that we have all gender restrooms on each floor in addition to the male and female restrooms. And one of the things that we did at all of our entry and exit points in the building, as well as all of the restrooms, both the all gender and male and female, is we have a wave to open on both the interior and exterior of those doors so that you don't have to push or touch the door. They'll automatically open if you just wave your hand in front of those sensors. And that's the image on this screen, is a sign for our all gender restrooms, and then the wave to open panel that we have outside of and inside each door. And finally, one of the things that we learned through the Universal Design Certification application was to ensure that our virtual inclusion was up to date and something that we were thinking through. So any content that we present obviously needs to be able to be seen from different vantage points in the room, as well as not have any of the white text on a yellow background or things like that that make it hard to see what is being presented. And so that is an ongoing thing that our brand and marketing team is working on to ensure that all of the content in our buildings can be easily seen by all participants, whether you are in the room or accessing content remotely. So the image on the screen is our dual monitor setup in these new rooms so that you can see content on one side and then virtual participants on another, which is far better than the rest of our buildings where some of our rooms have drop-down projectors and things of the past. We're really trying to make sure that we can include a hybrid experience for all of our employees. That's all for me. Back to you, Chan.
Thank you, Bill Fadoon. And for our next presentation, we'll go to Nick Zousky.
Yeah, I don't have any slides or anything to share, so it'll just be me talking. So as the accessibility coordinator for the DNR, I deal with mostly outdoor spaces, which is kind of different from the other panelists. So it's my job to make sure that we include, or we don't exclude anyone, which is, as you can imagine, probably more difficult than the average accessibility with trails and stuff. So we do try to go above and beyond, you know, the ADA. I tell people all the time that, you know, that's just the bare minimum. But one of the challenges we have is just nature isn't, you know, automatically accessible. So something like trails, we try to have some easier accessible trails. So I don't like to put the term accessible trail on maps because that means so many different things to different people. I actually forgot to mention that I'm a wheelchair user. I have a power wheelchair that actually does pretty well off-road. So what is accessible to me is not accessible to someone that has like a manual chair or uses a walker or something like that. So we're really trying to focus on you know, all different disabilities. So one of the big projects in the last couple of years was Eagle Tower at Peninsula State Park. So it has over 600 feet of ramp to get up to a 65-foot tall tower. We put in special sections of railing for viewing, you know, for people with like a shorter stature or like a wheelchair user that can't, you know, isn't, you know, necessarily tall enough to look over the edge. So it's always kind of an inventive adventure, because there are a lot of things that I deal with that aren't mentioned by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So people always kind of use that term ADA to mean accessible. So like I get people ask me about ADA hunting blinds, which don't exist. So what, you know, because nowhere in the ADA does it mention hunting blinds. So what I do is I interpret spaces and use standards from different things, like, you know, the standard 60-inch turning radius for like bathrooms and stuff. So we make sure to incorporate that into a hunting blind, along with lever door handles and, you know, like operable reach heights for, you know, things like windows or something. So it's a lot of making up stuff as I go along, and working with our engineers or property managers or architects. Like my job is, because it does mostly deal with outdoor spaces, but it's also for indoor spaces, like anywhere that the public goes, such as like service centers or like our headquarter buildings. So I also have a hand in that, and then programs. But as far as the physical access, it's a little bit different animal when you're dealing with stuff that doesn't, there are no necessarily cut and dry specs that I can look at to recreate something. So, always dealing with outdoor amphitheaters and playgrounds, and we have these like nature interpretive trails and viewing platforms and towers and boardwalks and all these elements that aren't necessarily listed anywhere. So it's a lot of kind of making stuff up as I go along. I hope I'm doing a good job. I have good people to work with, as far as like engineers and stuff. So yeah, I guess that's about all I have. I don't have any fancy pictures. I'm not a picture person, so sorry about that. But yeah, that's my job in a nutshell.
Thank you, Nick Zousky. And now our final presentation is from Rebecca Hoyt.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Hoyt. As I mentioned earlier, I work for the Department of Civil Rights with the City of Madison, and we are charged with ensuring that policies and practices within the city are compliant with Chapter 39 of our city ordinance. And I work for a division of the Department of Civil Rights that's called the Division of Equity and Social Justice. And my role is to ensure that city facilities, city services, and any entity that receives funding from the city is accessible to people with disabilities. I am a person with a disability. I have dyslexia, and I'm also the parent of a neurodivergent student. And prior to joining the city, I worked at Disability Rights California for 14 years. And a lot of my work involved helping with people with disabilities to be able to access systems and services that they needed for employment. So I sometimes was looking at inclusive design and accessibility for not just physical spaces, but also things like an application form or a process that someone would have to go to in order to access services they needed. And I often say in jest that inclusive design is my advocacy love language, because as Nicholas mentioned, there are some shortfalls to the ADA. It's an incredible piece of legislation. But unfortunately, it doesn't include all disabilities. And from a social model of disability perspective, my experience as a person who can walk into a space and find it's not accessible for me is that it's immediately telling me that this space or this process was not built for or by people like me. And so what happens is when we go through the reasonable accommodations process, what we're doing is trying to sort of back end fix systems and spaces that were not designed for people with disabilities. So embracing inclusive design at the forefront of any project is a way to bake in or to center inclusion in the process. And that is good for business. It is, one of the tenets of inclusive design is to reach the broadest audience possible. Often people who don't need accessibility features won't notice them in your designs and your programs. So for example, there is a ramp leading into our city building. Lots of people who depend on that ramp use it, and folks who use it as a convenient option to enter the building. But those features are really critical to making sure that that space is accessible. I know that our session today focuses a lot on housing. So I do want to include some housing resources in the chat and also sort of frame the issue very briefly. So The challenges that people with disabilities face in housing is really threefold. So one, there's an availability issue. According to a study by Apartment List, only 6% of homes across the United States are accessible, whereas 15% of homes across the United States have a person with a disability. And this in particular impacts people with physical disabilities. There's also an overarching unfortunate discrimination against people with disabilities in housing. According to the Fair Housing authorities, over half of the discrimination complaints that were filed in 2020 were people with disabilities who were not able to access housing or had barriers to housing as a result of their disability. And lastly, affordability. People with disabilities experience poverty at a much higher rate than their non-disabled peers. And these issues are compacted for people with intersectional identities, including Black, Indigenous people of color, people who are monolingual, non-English speaking, immigrants, women, and people who are non-binary. So in order to really reach the demand for affordable, accessible housing, it's incumbent on people with disabilities and builders and designers to work together to create the supply. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rebecca Hoyt. So Chan Stroman here again, and thank you to all the panelists for these presentations. Now we're going to move on to the next part of our panel, which is to have some questions and discussion for the panelists to explore these themes while I try to turn off my alarm. Pardon the bells in the background. I'd like to pose our first question to Nick Zousky. And the question is, what are obstacles to achieving inclusive and accessible facilities? And of course, you've mentioned the very special circumstances of nature, which is not being able to start from scratch with, designs and specs and, go out and buy materials. And so you have some additional circumstances that, a typical construction and design does not face. So what are the obstacles that you encounter? How do you deal with those obstacles? And what's the language and communication and dialogue strategies and techniques that you use to overcome those obstacles?
So the main obstacles are money, and money. Because, it's hard to, I'll just use Eagle Tower as an example. To rebuild a tower is, I think around $400,000 or $500,000. To put a ramp on the tower was like $3.5 million. So that's a big factor. Also, like language and stuff. So what I do especially is, so it will be a big mistake to build something non-accessible and then have to close it down until it is brought up to, like standards, because that creates a real us versus them attitude with the public. It's like, oh, why, like there's some pretty nasty comments about, disabled people should go do something else or something like that. So really, like my goal is to sell things to everyone. And, even though, we want accessibility, like it's important to sell it to, non-disabled people because they are the majority. So like when, for instance, like door openers on our entrance stations and stuff. So everyone uses those. I mean, if you have your hands full, if you have a baby carriage or your stroller or whatever. So I think it's important that, when we talk about universal design, to truly think about universal, like not just how many different people with different disabilities can use it, but also how it benefits people without disabilities. Because, generally speaking, they are the majority, and, we try to accommodate everyone. And so it's kind of hard to it's a hard sell if it's only meant to serve like a small part of the community. So that's one of my main, goals, because everything we do has to be put up for public comment and all that. If it's over like $50,000 or something, it goes to Department of Administration. So we really do need buy-in from the community before we can do any of these big projects. So that's basically how I try to sell it. It's like, hey, this is great for everyone. It's not just, so instead of saying, and a lot of times just language, instead of saying, like we're putting in an accessible kayak launch, we'll say like it's a universal use kayak launch, because we don't, people sometimes think like, well, if it's an accessible launch, I can't use it. It's not for me. Like, no, it's for everyone. We just make sure that people with disabilities can also use it. So that's something that we've been working on doing.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Rebecca Hoyt, I'd like to, I'm curious about whether or what types of inquiries or complaints you might see you might receive in the city, in the Civil Rights Department, relating to accessibility of say outdoor facilities like the ones that Nick has just described for us, and whether there is a path towards resolving and working towards constructive solutions when these kinds of issues come up, using some of the techniques that Nick has mentioned.
Absolutely. In terms of outdoor spaces, the city has a master plan to redesign many of its parks and recreation facilities. And I will say, since I came to the city of Madison, I've noticed that there is a little bit of tension between the disability community and the biking community. And that has sort of driven some decisions that have been made in the master plan. But I'm really pleased to be working with the Parks Department and doing site visits at many of the parks throughout the city. And one of our disability rights commissioners has been joining me, Jean Menke, in looking at these spaces and coming up with workable solutions, so that even though the master plan is at a place where it's mostly finalized, there are opportunities to make spaces more accessible. Including looking at the direction of traffic, looking at putting in a stop sign, and things that don't alter the master plan. We're actually exploring the possibility of having folks be able to reserve a golf cart or a mobility device so that they can navigate the park system, even if they're not a wheelchair user but have mobility issues and need that piece of equipment.
Great, thank you, Rebecca Hoyt. Our next question goes to Bill Fadoon and John Chapman. How should we start, and who should we start with in the design build process to ensure accessibility and inclusion?
I can start. This is Bill. Start early, involve a lot of partners if you can. Hire a design firm like EUA that can help you through this. Not every organization is as large as CUNA Mutual, and fortunate enough to have an engagement resource group like we do, Allies for Disabilities. So there are wonderful organizations like Access to Independence that you can reach out to for help. And I think just stay curious and ask those questions early on. I know Rebecca said during her presentations, if you don't have a disability, you might not know what to look for and the types of questions to ask. When we were starting our project here on the Madison campus, I did a day in a wheelchair with one of our wheelchair users on campus just to understand how our buildings were not functioning. You know, many of them were built in the 80s before ADA was a thing, and there are a lot of spots that just are not accessible and are terrible for different users of various abilities, and being able to see that firsthand was really eye-opening and powerful.
Thanks, Bill. I can add a little to that. I think is you know, we're in a very unique time in terms of design and construction, economic challenges, supply chain issues, and I heard a panel recently speak to ways to improve that is to, as Bill mentioned, get everyone in the room early in a project. Bring in the plumber, bring in the electrician, bring in the structural engineer, bring in the landscape architect, and all collaboratively understand what can be done and what challenges there are. And I think that would apply to ensuring accessibility and inclusion as well, to get as many people and as many voices and get input from everyone before you start the project. Thanks, Chan.
So Chan Stroman here. I'm going to ask a follow-up myself to John Chapman and Bill Fadoon. We got a lot of good information about the new office building and that process. I'm curious as to what best practices might be. And John, John Chapman, you are in practice, so you will be in the course of your work dealing all the time with new clients or returning clients. And how do you initiate that idea if a client has not come to you with it already?
I think, you know, as a number of us have said today, it's so important to go beyond ADA. So many of our clients just expect the minimum to be done, and trying to work together to sort of go beyond, as Jason was saying earlier this morning, going beyond compliance is, I think, is a topic that we like to bring up early in the process. And you've seen the evidence in Bill's project at CUNA Mutual, having those discussions early on, and setting you know, priorities, I think is important to the design process.
Thank you, John Chapman, Chan Stroman again. And this is a follow-up to that follow-up with Bill Fadoon. Bill, you are now basically you have one client, which is CUNA, where you work. But before that, obviously, you were an architect in practice, and I would imagine have a network and connections and people, fellow architects who look to your experience and perhaps guidance. And when you interact with them, even if it's not necessarily in a client architect capacity anymore, how would you try to influence the ecosystem to raise the visibility and importance of accessibility and inclusion for design?
It's a wonderful question. A lot of knowledge sharing between people I've worked with before, other colleagues and things like that. And also just sharing those lived experiences that I've had. When I lived in San Francisco, I did a project with the BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit System, to map the different stations for people who are blind. And so trying to come up with raised floor plans so that they could see where the access points were, where the elevators were, and things like that. And just sharing those experiences about how important that was. It seemed like a small step to take, but it made such an impact on those people that needed that extra floor plan to help them. Sharing things like that just get people's wheels turning, and hopefully they remember to ask questions like that in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill Fadoon. So the final question is to Rebecca Hoyt. What do you see as the next steps for the disability community in the movement for access and inclusion?
I think that I want to call on history a little bit before I answer, but I think that part of what made the movement towards the ADA so successful was a lot of organizing and mobilizing across disability communities. So I think there has not really been that level of cross-disability connecting and mobility since the ADA. So I think it's really important for the disabled community to sort of reach across our different sub-communities and build relationships there. I think universal design and inclusive design are an incredible way to build those relationships. I think we also have to look at creating allies in communities and movements that are leading in spaces where we need access. So there are many organizations and community groups who are already working on housing issues. And I think we need to align our issues and our movements together to build power within the community. I also want to note that we do have an election coming up, and this is a great opportunity for community members to connect with folks who are on the ballot or newly elected officials and share about the issues that are important to you and to the disability community in order to move those issues forward and really create partnerships with policy and decision makers as well as the building community. And lastly, I think there's kind of a circular relationship between employment and housing. So people need access to work, access to funds in order to afford accessible housing. And then often people need reliable housing in order to access work. So I do believe that the more we advocate in the area of employment, the more opportunities for accessible housing will be available to us.
Thank you, Rebecca Hoyt. I'd like to maybe call on Nick Zousky and in sort of a related follow-up to what Rebecca Hoyt's just described. Obviously, we're all talking about going beyond compliance and accessibility. I'm curious as to what you're seeing as, you know, as the access coordinator, what you are seeing from people with disabilities that may have varying needs. How are they making those needs known? And are there ways in which organizing or being more collective in approach might be more effective or create a greater pressure to address the money obstacle to achieving accessibility inclusion in the work that you do?
Well, first and foremost, just show up. We have public meetings on everything. I mean, it's a state bureaucracy. You know, nothing gets done without without public input. And showing up is the first step. So if you see something, like, 'cause we have, like, I made posters to post at all parks and stuff. If someone sees something that can be improved, to send me an email, and because we are listening. That's the thing. Is like, I think people kind of get like not complacent, but they think like, well, what good is it going to do if I say something to someone about something in a park? Well, it does a lot of good. I can't get to every park and look at every nook and cranny. So and we do the master planning and everything is, we have public meetings for everything. Show up, and then also like demand, just demand things. Every citizen is part owner in a state park. Like, you guys, just as much as me, have ownership of these things. You pay taxes and whatever. So it's not necessarily what we want our agenda for things. It's everyone's agenda to get these things done. So, the first step is showing up, and then also, demanding from legislators or whoever, like when we do a budget, make, these biannual budgets, to just, demand that more gets paid, more money gets used for accessibility. We want to do it. There are some legislative blockades and things like that, but it's not, universal design, at least within the DNR, is there's no one against doing it. And so when people suggest things that should be done, like, we listen. We really do. So I think the most important thing would be, just to show up and let your voice be heard.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick Zousky. And so Chan Stroman here again. Thank you all of our panelists for that great discussion of some interesting questions related to our topic. So we've got just a few minutes left in our panel, and we'd like to hear from each of our panelists on your ideas for moving the needle to improve the process of communicating and collaborating to ensure inclusion and accessibility. So I want to start first with John Chapman.
Thank you, Chan. Moving the needle, I think, is so important to sort of go beyond compliance. One of our clients, we recently completed a new student housing project for UW Whitewater. And they have universal design as an integral part of their culture. And so, but going sort of beyond with enhanced ADA units, door actuators, you often think of them at the front door, but then you never think of them later on in the building, like Bill mentioned earlier. Mirror placement, the location of mirrors to accommodate, seated individuals, lower window sills, wider turning radii. I think just, again, if we keep going beyond sort of our compliance, the minimum compliance, I think the more opportunities we'll have to get to ensure accessibility and inclusion.
Thank you, John Chapman. Next, let's hear from Bill Fadoon.
Thank you, Chan. I think one of the things that we've all heard here today is money helps, and that's certainly true, but I know there are a lot of smaller companies out there, smaller organizations that may not have a lot of money. And I think one of the takeaways that I want everyone to leave this panel discussion with is that it doesn't have to be expensive. Having a conversation with people is free. And so just being able to start there and understand what's important to people in your organization, in your community, that's free. You can figure out the money later, and you can do things incrementally. You don't have to do it all at once. Every little bit helps. So I think having those conversations, trying to talk as much as you can with different people in all different walks of life just helps you be more aware. And that's how you start to move the needle.
Thank you so much, Bill Fadoon. And now let's hear from Rebecca Hoyt.
Yeah, as we have this discussion, I'm thinking about a conversation I had at the 30th anniversary of the ADA with Fred Schroeder, who's a former director of the Rehabilitation Administration Agency. And his advice was that people with disabilities should not settle. We should remain engaged and be upset about inaccessibility. The ADA entitles people with disabilities to access. And even when there are places where the ADA doesn't cover all access needs, I think it's important that we don't give up. And as Nick mentioned, that we show up and engage, with folks. And it is very important that we sort of learn to communicate with builders in a builder language, learn to communicate with legislators in a legislator language, and also that is reciprocated. I think we could all do a better job at finding a common ground and way to build a vocabulary between us.
Thank you, Rebecca Hoyt. And now from our final panelist, Nick Zousky.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's a combination of all of the things that have been mentioned, show up, fundraise, complain, just, be like anyone else that, if you want to see something happen, like, you have to, what is the old cliche, like, be the change that you want to see or something like that. Because like, I know at least in my organization, the DNR, like, we are listening. It's just that, like even me as a person with disability that does this, this is 100% of my job. There are things that I don't think of or don't see, or so I think to really, in my case, to really move the needle is just I think people just need to voice their concerns, complain when needed, come up with ideas, send them in, whatever, like just be a part of the community that you want to see.
Thank you so much, Nick Zousky. This is Chan Stroman again, and I'd like to thank all of our panelists on our Understanding the Process panel today, and also to thank all of you out there, attendees, all of you in the audience, for your interest and attention for this topic. I am hopeful that our panel has conveyed the attainability and the importance, as well as the importance of having designers and builders working together with people with disabilities early in the process, and how communication early and often can make inclusion and accessibility beyond compliance an achievable reality. So that pretty much wraps up our panel. There will be a 10-minute break before the Accessibility Design Forum's next panel, which is called The Value of Accessibility, which is on your same Zoom link. So please stay tuned for announcements during the break, and I hope to have the chance to meet and mingle in person at our networking event this evening. Thank you.
Chan, thank you very much for the excellent presentation. Thank you to John, to Bill, to Rebecca, and Nick as well. It was our first of 3 panels here today at the first ever Accessibility Design Forum. I hope that you can join us for our next panel. We're going to be starting at 10:30, so 10 minutes. We'll take a 10-minute break. Join us back here at 10:30 for our next panel on the value of accessibility. We'll see you soon. And also, we hope we see you tonight, 4 o'clock at Ovation Sky Club here downtown Madison for our networking happy hour. See you in 10 minutes. Have a good break.